Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast. This is episode 25 and we're glad you are here today. I am Dave Murray. I am the senior consultant for the DiJulius Group. And with me today is our president, our CEO, our chief revolutionary, John DiJulius. Welcome, John.
Hello, Dave. I am so excited for episode 25. It is going to be a doozy. It is the recap of week 2 of the Customer Service Revolution Conference. As probably most of our listeners know, the Customer Service Revolution Conference aired every Thursday in October. And there's 5 Thursdays, and we are recapping week 2, which was an exciting week of amazing speakers.
It really was. Session 2 was fantastic. It was a great follow-up to session 1, which was fantastic. Obviously, this is going to keep rolling along. It just keeps getting better and better. And I'm excited to start recapping the great lessons that we learned in session 2. But before we do that, I just want to remind our listeners, again, that you are listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast. And you can find us wherever you go and get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you go, we are there. We'd love for you to subscribe. And we'd also really like to hear your thoughts. So if you have any comments that you have about the show, whether it's something you love or something you'd like to see change, please let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts and put them into practice. So thank you for that. John, let's dive right into the Customer Service Revolution Conference, session number 2, where you, as usual, led us off. And I'll tell you, your presentation really had the chat room buzzing. People were really enjoying what you were saying. They're really practical things that they couldn't wait to go back and put into place. I know you have a couple of clips. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the first one right here.
A recession is like a business enema. This isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. I personally have found that I'm at my best when my companies and I are being challenged or fighting for survival. In a strange way, I'm actually more comfortable with and become more energized by the obstacles in our way. That is my nature. And while others are panicking and making short-sighted decisions, my confidence level increases. I act like I've been waiting for this day. I knew it was coming, and everyone in my company is in the best place they could be.
So, as I said, the chat room was buzzing, the business enema observation. This is such an opportunity, and obviously many folks out there are looking at what's going on right now, the pandemic and the economic impact that so many organizations and individuals are facing. And you came out there and said, hey, this is an opportunity we can't miss. As a matter of fact, another statement you had in your presentation that really stuck with a lot of people was when you said a recession is a terrible thing to waste. And it's so true. It's such a great opportunity for many of us.
Yeah, I mean, A, what choice do we have, right? And B, with this, there are gifts to be found. And, as leaders, as parents, whatever, our employees, our customers, our children are looking at us. And we have to show them the confidence that we can get through this. And I think it's really critical. We can't pick and choose when we want to be leaders. And now's the time. I mean, how we lead during a crisis really says a lot about us. So I think it's imperative for us, as the theme is for the Customer Service Revolution Conference this year, is reimagine. And so how can we reimagine? And, that's what we've been doing. this year. And I know a lot of our clients are doing that to make it, the best thing that's ever happened to them as far as a business strategy. Maybe not this year, but when we look back, towards the middle end of 2021, and we're, stronger, bigger, we can look back, we would never be here if we weren't forced to pivot last year.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an opportunity if you have that attitude, if you have that mindset and turn it into that. And such a great message. Another great message you share, John, I know is in the next clip about leadership.
Well, let's listen.
If you are confident your business will survive the crisis, communicate that with your employees. Tell them you got this, you got their back, and you won't let anything happen to them. To give my employees more confidence that they were in the right company and peace of mind, back in April, I asked all my employees to set a date in December, 9 months in advance, to schedule a victory dinner at the best restaurant in the city to celebrate how we got through this.
So it's so important to be thinking positive and to show your teams that you are thinking positive. And, leaders like everyone else can get stuck in a rut or be thinking, why me? And all those things. But it's so important for leaders to really be thinking beyond that and really showing their teams how to respond.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we have to, in all areas of life, be Snow White. We have to be actors and actresses, and maybe we are in a fetal position in the closet or at home. But, again, people are looking at us, and we have to really show that. And I think a lot of it becomes your strategy, because I think what you talk about, you bring about, and showing that, we are in the right place and we get everyone together and create that. So, controlling the narrative and galvanizing an enemy, and it might be the pandemic in this case, and it probably is, but years past, it, could be the price cutters or, the big boxes or whoever. But when you rally everyone around, a definable enemy and give them a clear line what the finish line is, people love that. They love to work towards something greater than themselves and get their minds off, what's happening in the moment.
Yeah. And, there are two other things that you mentioned in your presentation that really hit home with me, especially when it comes to leadership. So I just want to make sure we throw those in here as well. One of them was when you said, tough times do not build character, they reveal it, right? And we're familiar with the old saying that tough times do build character. You take that a step further and say, no, they really don't. They reveal your character, what it currently is. And as leaders, that's such an important thing to remember as those eyes are upon us. And then the other thing that you said that really resonated with a lot of people was more is caught than is taught, right? So people learn more by observing, by being part of something, by seeing those actions, as opposed in that traditional classroom setting or in a training manual or whatever it may be. And so two really important things for leaders to be thinking about, especially during tough times.
Totally agree. There's another quote that I don't know who the original author of the quote was, but go show the proper way, and when necessary, use words. And which is kind of like more is caught than taught. Don't do as I say, do as I do. And, don't point the finger, be the person doing it, modeling it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great quote. I think that might have been St. Ignatius of Loyola, actually.
Really?
Yes. Go teach, and when necessary, use words.
Yeah. That's it. Well, good. All right. So let's talk about the next speaker that some of our listeners may have heard of, the one and only Seth Godin, who has been interviewed on one of our past podcasts. It was a bucket list item to cross off after 12 years to finally get Seth Godin to present at the Customer Service Revolution Conference. And the title of his presentation was Customer Service is Free. And, what's interesting is when I saw his title, I was like, all right, but man, I mean, he's a marketing genius. I don't know why I'm questioning his logic, but the way he spun it in a great, right way is, customer service is a profit center. And I just loved, we could talk 3 times as much longer than he spoke about what he spoke about.
Yeah, for sure. And, you're so right, John. He's known, at least I've always known him as a marketing guru, right? That's what, at least I always thought he was his specialty. And he's written so many great books and talks about marketing, but also loyalty. And, it reminds me a little bit, John, that you've been saying for a lot of years now that one of these days, the marketing department is going to be reporting to the experience department. And Seth did such a great job of really talking about the two and how closely they're related and how they can really help each other. And in so many organizations, they're separate, they're siloed. And his message is, no, they need to work together because they really are working on the same team.
So what's the, you want to tee up the first clip we have here?
Yeah, sure. So Seth shared so many great things. The chat was buzzing as usual, but even more so for Seth with people asking questions like, wait, how did he say that again? And people were so into what he had to say and didn't want to miss a word. In this first message, he really starts to talk about the concept of service being free and what you mentioned, John, about how important service is from a profitability standpoint.
It is possible to use customer service as a marketing tool because marketing is not the same as advertising. Marketing is what we do and how we do it. And it turns out that if you invest the money correctly in customer service, it pays for itself. Every dollar spent delighting someone in a way that causes them to talk to someone else earns you more than $1, which means that not only is customer service free, it's a profit center. And when a company has a profit center, what they generally do is invest in it. What they generally seek to do is say, how do we spend more time and money to make more profit doing what we were just doing?
Yeah, I mean, I've never even looked at it that way, as that it's a profit center. For every dollar you invest in it, you can get $3 or $4 back. And that's better margins than a lot of, products and services we sell.
Yeah. And, John, we see in our business, and we talk about this all the time, that the unfortunate reality out there in a lot of businesses is they see a customer service team, a customer service department, they see it as an expense, not an investment. And so I think this is a really, really important message for a lot of companies out there, that you need to be focusing your energy and dollars on this team, this department, this initiative to make sure that it's delivering, because it's such a great opportunity.
Yeah. And then he pivoted to such, a great point of where we're investing our money, going after potential new customers who have very little brand recognition, if any, or people who are already doing business with us. So I really enjoyed this clip.
And your marketing department spends most of its time and effort getting people who haven't heard of you to hear about you. They are constantly interrupting the world in a very, very expensive way to somehow persuade them to buy from you. Turning someone who isn't a customer into a customer is really expensive.
It's so true. We hear that all the time, how much more it takes to obtain a new customer versus to retain an existing customer. Yet companies are out there all the time trying to find those new customers, and sometimes at the expense of the customers they have right there that they might not be given the attention that they should be. It's such an important and true message.
Yeah. And in the olden days, your marketing was your offense and your customer service was your defense, meaning, we had a customer service department in case you needed, support or complaints. And finally, because of, people like Seth and the explosion of customer experience, people are realizing your customer experience is your best marketing.
Absolutely. Another thing that Seth brought up too, which I thought was really, really meaningful on the same topic of those existing customers, he talked about activated evangelists, right? So if companies are more focused on activating evangelists as opposed to getting out there, getting new customers, he mentioned that an activated evangelist can bring some companies 10, 20, maybe 30 new customers on their own, right? They can become your own advertising team out there, finding those new customers for you. So again, just reason after reason to really focus and invest in your service.
And this next clip, Seth says, if you're going to try a little bit, and I'm paraphrasing, but a little bit better to make your customer service, it's probably not, worth the effort, So let's listen.
Trying a little bit harder, answering on 2 rings instead of 4, making it so that your voice system actually makes sense. Those are table stakes. Sure, you should do those things, but they're not going to pay for themselves. What's going to pay for itself is when you so dramatically overachieve against the expectation and the promise that the best way for me to repay you is to tell my friend. You don't want to reclaim 10% of your customer service budget. You want your customer service budget to triple.
Yeah, it's not worth it. If you don't want to increase your customer service budget by 10%, you want to triple it. Then it will become a profit center.
Which is probably a little counterintuitive to a lot of people. A lot of people probably hear Seth's message of making this a profit center, and their first thought is, let's go back and make sure everyone's a little bit nicer and doing a little bit more. And he's saying, no, that's not going to work. You really got to go all in on this. You got to make sure that it becomes who you are as an organization, which is a great message.
And then, Dave, the last piece to share, and there's so many pearls of wisdom, and let me share, if you're not registered for the 2020 Virtual Customer Service Revolution Conference, and you're not listening to this after November 30th, you still have time to go register, and you can watch all 5 weeks. They do expire November 30th. So we are doing any of the speakers justice, especially with Seth. We're covering, probably 3% of his pearls of wisdom. But the next thing that was really great, and I think to a lot of people it surprised them that I 1,000% agree with him, is firing an unprofitable group of customers with kindness and care. What did you think of that?
Again, counterintuitive to a lot of people, right? What, fire a customer? Why would we ever do that? But he brings up a great point that, sometimes we lose a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of dollars on those customers that aren't right for us. And I loved how he added what you just said with kindness and care, because that's really, really important. But, a lot of organizations don't think that way and would not think that way. And so I found that his talk challenged the conventional wisdom in a lot of ways. And, another thing that he mentioned in that same area, which I think is so true, is it's okay to treat your customers differently, right? If you have a customer that spends a lot, right, their lifetime value is huge, it's okay to treat them a little differently, treat them a little better. And again, we hear that in our business a lot. We have to treat all of our customers equally. We can't do that. But Seth says, no, it's okay to not only treat them a little differently, a little better, but it's also okay to show everybody else you're doing that so that maybe they want to become one of those customers too. Yeah.
And we always go back to being a elite, platinum, whatever gold level is on an airline, and you get to board first and you get free upgrades and all that. And they parade you down first, and our elite, platinum, whatever the highest honor is, can now board first, and you get to see maybe with envious. And I totally agree that treat everyone well with respect, genuine hospitality. But those who do for you should receive backstage passes. They should receive VIP treatment of access that the normal, run-of-the-mill customer doesn't get, but can. They can join that fraternity if they choose to.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, John. And maybe that's what scares some companies when they hear that. Just because you're going to treat a certain segment of customers really, really well doesn't mean that other customers have to suffer, right? It's not that it's a pendulum where these guys are getting better treatment so the others are going to suffer, That's not the case. You have to have that excellent, consistent service across the board. But when you have the opportunity to take care of your best customers, go ahead and take that.
I will be honest, the most surprising thing, Seth said a lot of, contrarian things that Seth says, but the most surprising thing was at the end when I asked him if he had more or less than 12 pairs of glasses, and he said less. I would have bet heavy in Vegas on the over on that.
Yeah, I would have too. I agree. He's got some pretty stylish eyewear, that's for sure.
So I think this is a good place. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
All right. We have an important message, and we'll be right back after that.
Have you registered to attend the virtual customer experience event of 2020? The Customer Service Revolution Virtual Conference takes place over 5 weeks in October. More than a dozen thought leaders bring you winning insight to reimagine and revolutionize for the year ahead. Register today at customerservicerevolution.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 25 of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I'm Dave Murray from the DiJulius Group, and along with me today is our President, CEO, and Chief Revolutionary, John DiJulius, and we're talking about the Customer Service Revolution Conference, session number 2, and we're halfway through our conversation. We just had a great chat about John's presentation and Seth Godin's presentation, and now we're going to talk about Chris Larkins. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Chris, John?
Yeah, Chris Larkins is a serial entrepreneur and been a senior executive at many big companies and, has worked, been an expert at turnaround and crisis management, you name it. Now he's a partner at CEO Coaching International. CEO Coaching International coaches some of the fastest growing CEOs worldwide. And Chris Larkins' presentation really shook up the audience in a good way, but definitely hit some nerves that I don't think people were ready for. And, with all his business acumen and brilliance, his presentation kind of gave us a time out from all that. And his title was What I Learned from Almost Dying. So let me play the first clip here.
I was 43, married with a 10-year-old daughter. I was at the peak of my professional success, having tripled the size of our company in a few short years. I was out conquering the world. And I just received a death sentence. I had brain surgery followed by 6 weeks of simultaneous radiation and chemo. And I almost had to die to learn that my bucket list was closer to home than I realized.
Wow.
Yeah, so the story itself is amazing, but then that last line right there, that it took this near-death experience for me to realize those things I was chasing were not the right things, right? Everything was a lot closer than I thought. It wasn't those business trips and fancy hotels and the elite status that we were just talking about on the airlines, John. It was all right there in his house, and he wasn't giving it enough attention.
Yeah, and his bucket list was closer to him. And what you didn't hear there was Chris talked about a story of when he was going through chemo, laying there, and his 10-year-old daughter at the time was upstairs listening to the soundtrack from Hamilton, and he couldn't go join her. He didn't have enough strength to, do it with her. But was really more like, that's, you can understand that. But what was even more where he was transparent and authentic was he then thought about all the times he was home, she was upstairs, and he was downstairs on the couch getting a report finished where, he could have, been there. And that was really the more painful of the experiences he was going through.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening for a lot of people at the conference to be thinking that way. And yeah, just like you said, made them stop and think and self-assess. We all need to do that from time to time. And, in the next clip, I think he took that a step further when he talked about SWOT analysis, which we hear about so many times in organizations, but how he did that on a personal level as well.
In November of 2019, when you were conducting your annual planning sessions for 2020, who here had a SWOT template that identified global pandemic, as your biggest threat. If I were starting my business today, what would I start doing that I'm not doing? And what would I stop doing that I currently am?
Yeah, and that's kind of going with our theme, right? That we brought up earlier about leadership is we didn't expect the global pandemic. It wasn't part of our SWOT analysis, but we got to be prepared and be ready. And, we just can't count on every 10 years it will be the next recession or whatever it is. We don't know when it's going to come. And if your business is only built to survive on perfect world circumstances, you're not going to be long.
And I like how he brought it to a personal level as well. We just heard him mention that nobody had global pandemic on their SWOT analysis when they were planning for 2020. And he said, I didn't have brain cancer on my personal SWOT analysis either, yet here it was, right? So those things, whether it's a global issue or a personal issue, those things are always going to pop up in our lives, and we need to be prepared.
And, you heard one of his questions. He said, he challenged the audience, ask yourself 3 provocative questions to prepare for 2021. And he just said, if I was starting my business, over again today, what would I start doing and stop doing? The second question was, if I was competing against my own company, what would I do? Mm-hmm. And then the third question is, would my business survive without me? And I thought those were great places to start.
Absolutely. People really gravitated to those questions. Everyone wanted to make sure they had them correctly so they could go back and work them into their businesses during their planning session. So that was really helpful information.
And Chris was great. But our next speaker it just seems to have a cult following. He has a stage name of Murray, and just all these people just love him. And is, of course, you, Dave Murray, our senior customer experience consultant. And what would you want to share with our listeners the title of your presentation?
Absolutely, John. My presentation was on finding your company's actionable true north. And so what I was talking about is familiar to a lot of our listeners if they're familiar with our organization, a service vision statement. But I wanted to make sure that organizations knew that a service vision statement is much more than something that guides us to great service, consistent and great service. It's also something that can unite our organization across departments, knock down silos, all those things if it's used properly. And that's really the message I wanted to get across.
And I really like, so much of what you said. Your scores were through the roof. Let's listen to the first clip we have here.
Important thing to know about service aptitude, it is up to us to create it and train our teams on our organization's service aptitude. If we don't, we are basically relying on the former employers of our team members for the customer service training they receive.
Yeah, Dave, I've talked about it, heard you speak numerous times, and I've never thought about it that way. If you're not training your employees on soft skills, service aptitude, you're relying on their former employers. And who wants to roll that dice the way, on that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of organizations make that mistake where they make assumptions, right? During the hiring process, you seem like a great person. You seem to like us. We like you. You seem to fit in. You're just going to go out there and do things the way we do it. And, that's why growth is such a killer when it comes to customer experience, because it's hard to replicate that if you don't have tools in place, if you don't have your service attitude created, that roadmap of this is how we do it. This is how we provide consistently great service.
Well, then you went into, it's one of the top 2 things that dictates, and you went into both of them, dictate, shape, someone's service aptitude.
We could easily change the name of a customer service vision statement to a customer service action statement. A service vision statement truly serves us as a rallying point across the entire organization. It does not matter your role or your tenure. It connects all of us.
Yeah, so I love that. The customer service vision statement, the rallying point.
And, I was able to cite a couple of examples of some partners of ours that did just that during this pandemic, that were able to use the service vision that they had already rolled out to make sure that departments were still working with one another, even though they were spread remotely and not seeing each other like they once were, or uniting an organization in these new times with a renewed focus on that tool. So it truly can and is an organization's actionable true north, because it guides them in that sense of purpose of providing that consistent experience to their customer, which at the end of the day is what organizations need to do.
And the way they need to do it is what you explain next.
Is to create a day in the life of a customer. This exercise is focused on compassion and empathy for our customers and really has us walking in their shoes.
And I think that's so critical. We need to look at it from the customer's viewpoint. And, writing up a script, a story, having your team members act it out as you advise the audience of whoever your customer is, what's going on in their world, personally and professionally, that really makes it critical that, you, the customer-facing employee, is both present and, hospitable, as well as the expertise that you provide, the job you do is so critical for, them having a successful day, a better day, looking like a hero to their boss or looking like a hero to their, customer, or whatever the situation is.
So true. And one important point on that, John, is, we want to make sure that organizations don't fall in the trap. If they're going into that exercise and they're breaking their team into some smaller groups and they're going to go out and write a script of what their day in the life of a customer would look like, just to remind them that it's not about all the stuff that we're going to do for the customer, right? It's not about them walking in and we blow them away with our great service and we provide all the solutions they need. It's a focus on what that customer is going through before we have the opportunity to interact with them, right? So all the things that they're dealing with, all the problems, all the issues. So it's really important that we're focused on that, because that's where the empathy really comes from. And empathy is so important to this process.
So Dave, you have because of the buzz from this presentation, we got a lot of demand. And so we've created a complimentary webinar that you are going to be delivering on November 2nd. Can you give our listeners a little more information on it?
Absolutely, John. I'm really looking forward to it. So it's going to be an opportunity to go a little deeper into all of the topics that I covered in this presentation. So what a service vision is all about, and how we start going about to create it. How to get your team to focus on that day in the life. So I'll be able to go a little deeper into what that exercise looks like if someone wanted to go back and conduct that exercise with their own teams and have them do it at their next staff meeting or half-day retreat or whatever it is. And you can do it virtually just as easily as you can do it in person, so you don't have to wait until your team's back in the office to go ahead and do that. And as you mentioned, John, that's going to be on November 2nd at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern. So I hope people are able to join.
Okay, which brings us to the last speaker of week 2. And I don't know who created the lineup order, but whoever it was brilliant because this was a great way to close a fantastic day. And I know a lot of people's favorite speaker is Mikki Williams. Mikki has been a motivational speaker for, 30 plus years. She's in the Hall of Fame. She's spoken at the White House. She is, spoken everywhere. And she did not disappoint.
Invest me through story to care about your data. You see, facts tell, stories sell. Stories move people to action.
And obviously, Mikki's presentation title was The Art and Heart of Storytelling. It's all about cracking the code of executive presence. And Mikki's message and her trainings aren't necessarily to help you become a paid-for, sought-after speaker that's traveling all over the world, or today traveling all over your house. But this presentation was for how to make leaders of companies just articulate their message better. What did you think of Mikki, Dave?
I thought Mikki was fantastic. It was my first time seeing her. I know she's been a presenter at the Customer Service Revolution in the past. That was before my time in a conference I was unable to attend, unfortunately. She was fantastic. And I think we need to go back and just talk about the clip that you just shared, John, because there were so many great tools that she just talked about in that 30 seconds of clips, right? Invest me through the story so that I care about your data, right? And so how many times are companies, do you find yourself sitting in a meeting where it's just looking at data, spreadsheets and numbers, but where's the story? Because the story is what gets you to care about those numbers. And I think that's forgotten too often. And so we need to have those stories to really help make that data come to life.
Yeah, and she gave she told so many great stories to really bring it to life, like saying, oh, and then she talked about head of an engineer department needing to get his engineers to process their documents and that, they weren't. And so, he probably could have, most engineers probably would have come out and talked about that, a high percentage are not processing or not documenting their processes. And wow, this is affecting the company and the bottom line, top line. But instead, she told them a story how he opened with, Sundays at grandma's 50 years ago. And she always made this special recipe. And they just enjoyed it. And every Sunday was, looking forward to. And then one day they lost grandma and no one had ever asked grandma for a recipe. And so went with her was that wonderful recipe that was no longer a family tradition. And such a great example to kind of, grab your heart, make you realize that we need to protect the customers. We need to protect the business. If I have to pick up the project while you're on vacation and you didn't document the processes, we're going to look bad. I'm going to look bad. And you'll probably look bad.
Yeah, I really love that story. And it goes to another thing that Mikki mentioned. Stories move people to action, right? And so think about it. If that engineer just went in and said, guys, you're not documenting, document more. Come on, we got to do it. We all know how that goes, right? That doesn't really move the needle, but the story, that particular story moved people to action. And so it just went to solidify how important those stories are. And so obviously that's huge information and something that someone who's a professional speaker needs to be doing every single time they're out there on a stage. But so do leaders, right? When you walk into a conference room and you want people to really pay attention to your numbers, you need to find a story to bring that to life.
Well, Mikki wraps it up here really well.
You are all in the same business, the emotional transportation business. What's going to make you open your wallet, folks? Rip open their hearts, move them emotionally. Real learning takes place heart to heart, not head to head.
Man, is that powerful.
Yeah.
You want them to open their wallets, you got to open their hearts, and exactly where you were going with that.
Yeah, what a great line also. Real learning takes place heart to heart, not mind to mind, and something really important for all of us to remember.
What an amazing week. I thought, nothing could top week one. Whenever we put on a great conference, there's always two sides of it. I'm very proud, but then I'm always like, how are we going to, top this? And week two rivaled week one, if not, topped it. And I got to admit, I'm just as excited about week three's lineup. Dave, you want to tell them who we will be talking about on episode 26 of the Customer Service Revolution podcast? Who are we going to be recapping from week 3 of the Customer Service Revolution conference?
Oh, absolutely, John. Week 3 is going to be fantastic as well. So you are going to kick off again with some amazing content, as has been the case. Then we're going to have Darren LaCroix. And Darren's such a great story, right? He's a person who wanted to be a comedian, tried it, was awful, but didn't give up, and now he's a world-renowned speaker. So he's going to share some advice on telling stories, especially today in this virtual age that we're now in, and how to be effective there. So that's going to be great. We also have Dr. Paul Bizjack, who is going to share some really, really insightful and important knowledge about well-being and how it affects everything, right? How it affects how you are at your job, how you are with your family, and how it's more than just taking care of yourself and watching what you eat. It has such a huge impact on so many facets of your life. I'll be back and I'll be talking about
the Murray.
I'll be talking about customer experience cycles, and not only focusing on our external customers, but our internal customers as well. So how do we make sure that we're doing things like great handoffs internally? So if it's going from sales to service, we have great consistent handoffs so the customer isn't suffering in that process, which happens unfortunately so many times. And then finally, we have Jessie Itzler, who will just wow the crowd because, man, he's been around and done some amazing things, built some amazing companies, all about customer loyalty. He has some great information to share.
So I'm going to ask you, if you're enjoying this, please go to your favorite place that you listen to podcasts, register for the Customer Service Revolution podcast on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you may listen. We would love if you can rate us, review us, and refer us. And we want to thank all of you for listening to episode 25. And thank you, Dave Murray, for your time and expertise.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, John. And we'll see you next time for episode 26.